Dear Boy is one of those games that immediately grab your attention with its art style. It looks like a playable animated film, but underneath the presentation, it's actually a pretty emotional little puzzle platformer about grief, trauma, and the bond between a runaway boy and a dear companion. So after finishing the game and testing how it runs, the big question is Dear Boy just visually beautiful, or is it actually worth your time on Steam Deck and PC? Let's talk about it. The game follows a young boy who runs away from home and early on crosses paths with a small deer. From there, the two begin a journey through forest, industrial areas, caves, mountains, and a few darker locations as the game slowly reveals what's really going on underneath the surface. And I'll keep this spoiler free because Dear Boy is definitely the kind of game where the emotional beats land better if you discover them for yourself. But what I can say is that the game heavily leans into the themes of loss, grief, and emotional pain, all without relying on traditional dialogue. It's very much a show don't tell kind of experience, and for the most part it works really well. What I liked about Dear Boy is that it doesn't just stay in the cute wholesome lane the whole time. Yes, the bond between the boy and deer is emotional core to the game, and there is a lot genuinely sweet moments between them. But the game also has a darker supernatural side that gives it some tension and helps it stand out from being just another cinematic indie platformer. It reminds me a bit of a game like Planet of Lana. In a way, it mixes puzzle platforming with an emotional story and a companion mechanic, but Dear Boy has its own identity because it gradually becomes more unsettling and mysterious as it goes on. It's not horror, but there's definitely sequences that feel more tense, desperate, and dangerous than I expected going in. Gameplay wise, Dear Boy is a mix of three things: platforming, stealth, and environmental puzzle solving. The platforming itself is pretty straightforward. You are climbing ledges, jumping across gaps, moving through different environmental hazards, and making your way through these very cinematic levels. The stealth section is usually about avoiding adults, guards, and infected creatures, waiting for the right timing and using the environment to get through safely. Then the puzzle side of the game is where the deer companion really comes in, because the deer isn't just there for story purposes, it's a core part of how the game plays. As the game goes on, the relationship between the boy and the deer evolves, and so do the gameplay mechanics built around that. Early on, the deer is vulnerable and you actually have to care for it, which changes how you move and solve puzzles. Later, the deer starts gaining new abilities and becomes much more involved in traversal and puzzle solving. You'll be using the deer to interact with switches, moving objects, clearing obstacles, help with platforming, and generally open up new ways to progress. That progression is probably one of the best parts of the game because it stops Dear Boy from feeling repetitive. Even though the structure stays fairly simple, the game keeps introducing small new twists to the companion mechanic, and that helps the pacing a lot. For me, the biggest strength of the gameplay is that it stays accessible without becoming boring. The puzzles aren't super difficult, and this isn't the kind of game you play for huge brain teaser moments, but it does enough to keep you engaged all the way through. It's very much a narrative first game, so the mechanics are there to support the journey rather than dominate it. And I think Lifeline Games understood the balance pretty well. The platforming also feels responsible enough, and I liked how the game occasionally uses different camera angles and layered environments to make the level feel a bit adventurous than a standard side-scroller. It's still linear, very much so, but it doesn't feel flat. That said, Dear Boy definitely isn't flawless. My main issue is that there are moments where readability becomes a problem. Because the game plays with depth and different environmental layers, there's a few sections where it's not immediately obvious where you can climb, where the ledge actually ends, or what exactly the game wants you to interact with. And in a cinematic puzzle platformer, that can be frustrating because when you get stuck, it breaks the flow of the story. There are also some stealth sections where the timing feels a little stricter than it probably needs to be, especially for a game otherwise feels designed to be approachable. Younger players or someone just here for the story might find those parts a little annoying, and there are a few mechanics later on that could have used better explanation or clearer tutorialization, because the game occasionally expects you to just figure it out through trial and error. Where Dear Boy really shines though is in the presentation. Visually it's gorgeous. The lighting, the environment, the animation work the weather effects, all of it comes together to give the game that playable animated film vibe the developers were clearly aiming for. Forests feel warm and alive. Snowy areas have a really nice atmosphere, and even the darker, corrupted sections have a strong visual identity. The sound design and music do a lot of heavy lifting too. Because the game doesn't rely on spoken dialogue, the soundtrack and ambient audio are doing a lot of the emotional work, and I think they do a great job. The quieter scenes feel intimate, the sad moments land well, and the more dangerous sequences have enough tension in the music to keep you locked in. And now, of course, since this is DockedHQ, performance matters just as much as the game itself. So let's talk about how Deer and Boy actually runs. Now, when it comes to Steam Deck performance, Deer and Boy actually ended up being a bit more interesting than I expected. By default, the game is currently capped at 40 FPS on Steam Deck across all graphical presets. So whether you're using low, medium or high, you're not going above the cap out of the box. I also tested the high preset, and while the game looked amazing, it did struggle in a few scenes. So I wouldn't say high is the ideal way to play if you want the smoothest possible experience. Right now, the best setup I found for Deer and Boy on Steam Deck is the medium preset, anti-aliasing set to TAA, refresh rate at 60Hz, and then using lossless scaling. With that setup, I was able to get a locked 60 FPS experience, and honestly, it feels great in motion. Now, as for the final verdict of the game, overall, I came away really liking Deer and Boy. It's not really trying to reinvent the cinematic puzzle platformer genre, but it does enough right to make itself worth playing. The emotional story works, the Deer companion mechanic keeps the gameplay fresh, and the presentation is easily the standout here. It looks beautiful, sounds great, and for most of its runtime, it balances its story, puzzles, and atmosphere really well. And when it comes to Steam Deck, even in its current state, I do still recommend it. With the settings I mentioned earlier, medium preset, TAA, 60Hz, and lossless scaling, I was able to get a locked 60 FPS experience, which made it feel excellent to play on the deck. So if you're interested in Deer and Boy and we're wondering whether it's worth playing on your handheld, I would say yes. But yeah, that's Deer and Boy on Steam Deck. So if you enjoyed the video, let me know what you thought of the game down in the comments, and I also wanted to ask you guys something. Normally on the channel, I post straight performance test videos and benchmark style clips without voiceover, but for this one I wanted to do more of a full review plus performance breakdown with commentary over it. So let me know if you enjoyed this style of video and if you would like to see me do more reviews plus performance test videos like this going forward. And while you're down there, let me know what games you'd like to see me review and test next on the Steam Deck. If you enjoyed this one, make sure to like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.